Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
Patrolling the Mojave
Almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
Patrolling the Mojave almost makes you wish for a nuclear winter.
For some reason, I never played Fallout New Vegas. You know, the Fallout game that almost everyone reveres as the best Fallout game in the series? Yeah, that New Vegas. And when I say I never played, I mean I never really played, because I played it once, tried to kill everyone in town and immediately got destroyed, then ventured out to the wasteland and got treated even worse. And I ended up quitting because I just rented it and figured it was way too hard to beat in 5 to 7 days, and I was being a coward. 14 years later, though, I decided to dust off my cowboy hat and get back on the proverbial horse to give it a fair go. And even after all this time, and all the advancements in gaming, I decided to see what all the hype was about raw. That's right. No mods, just a vanilla decade-and-a-half-old PC port from Bethesda. What could go wrong? Let's just get my complaints out of the way because I only have a few major ones. And before you rush to the comments saying,
"But it's a 14-year-old game, what did you expect?"
Stop! Reread the title of the video. Fallout New Vegas in 2024. So, we're judging it from today's lens, and with that, we're judging it by today's standards. That said, I'll give it some leeway for being older, but I want people to know what to expect and how to maybe counter it. Because it may be cheap nowadays, but your time is not.
What the Sigma?
First, have you ever been walking somewhere in real life and you think, oh man, that doesn't look that far? Then 2 minutes into your journey, you realize, damn, this short walk is going to take forever. Then you decide to pick up your pace to speed it along, but you're horribly out of shape like me, and you can't sprint. Well, you might just be a courier from New Vegas, because neither can they apparently. And although sprint wasn't added in Bethesda games until Skyrim, it really hurt in this game because it is supposed to be a sprawling desert, and boy does it feel like it. So my suggestion is, even if you want a vanilla playthrough, at the very least, download a sprint mod if you're comfortable with modding. There are a few that work pretty well from what I've seen, but I am stubborn and I decided to just keep suffering. Also, I didn't want to disrupt this very, very fragile game in any way, which leads me to my second complaint. It's crashed pretty consistently about every 30 minutes since I started playing, and it's really annoying, considering I put about 30 hours into it.
But you can't do this to me. You know how much I sacrificed?
Bethesda Gamer pro tip here, save after everything you don't want to replay, and you won't run into this issue as much. There were only a couple times in my whole playthrough where I hadn't saved for a while and the crash really hurt, but honestly just stay on top of your saves and it won't be an issue. And I know there's some hardcore Bethesda gamers out there who are like, oh, but the immersion. Well, if it was actually immersive, then people wouldn't take 8 shotgun shots to the face. Okay, so that leads me into my next complaint. Armor, at least on hard difficulty, was really poorly designed, in my opinion. Almost every enemy I ran into from a faction had some kind of armor, which immediately negates a ton of damage if you're using guns. And the way that armor is handled in this game is just like a blanket effect, so even if I unload like 10 rounds of buckshot to somebody's bare face, skin, and eyelids, it acts even as though it's covered with a metal plate, which is stupid. Some of the common legionary enemies were walking around with like sleeveless armor and headgear that didn't even cover their face, and they were treated the same as people in literal power armor. Like, what? And look, I know it's a commonly known fact that Fallout 3 and New Vegas have ridiculously tanky enemies across the board, but like, they never got easier. Even at nearly max level, I struggled to kill pretty much every enemy with armor, and there's a ton of them. It wasn't until endgame that I even tried getting into energy weapons, so I was a little behind the curve on that, and armor-piercing rounds were near impossible to find or buy. To me, it was just really frustrating that they created a system that you so commonly run into, with the only counters being to run an entirely different build, or use an item that doesn't get dropped by enemies, is a pain in the ass to craft, and is only sold like half a magazine at a time, from almost every vendor I saw, if you're lucky. I had like 10,000 caps on me at any given moment towards the end of the game, and I still never had any armor-piercing rounds because nobody sold them. But once again, that's just stupid design because more than half of the enemies in the game that I ran into had a high armor rating that negated like 90% of my damage. So in retrospect, I wish they either used super high armor ratings more sparingly, because then it would make the challenging enemies with big badass armor more scary and more challenging, or just made the counters more accessible to different builds. Lastly, there's quite a bit of overall jank. But as I've said before, it's a Bethesda game, and literally every game, no matter who it's made by, has its bugs. Skyrim is my favorite game of all time, but many people couldn't even load up their PC version on Steam without a game-breaking cart glitch, so I can give it some grace. It just really shows its age with these bugs and doesn't do any favors to the fact that I'm just trying to look at this game like it's an indie game that came out recently with a retro aesthetic. The worst of the bugs was this glitch where I would get stuck in vats. My character would enter vats like normal, then just completely refuse to shoot the enemies, leaving me stuck in vats taking damage in slow motion.
All the way away from my cover, please. Such a shit fucking game.
This happened pretty often, and it got me killed quite a bit, until I just finally started giving up and reloading my save before I had even entered that fight. Because I was tired of helplessly watching my character die in slow motion because of something I didn't even do wrong. I feel like an easy way to fix this is if there was just some kind of cancel VATS feature, because even when I did get my attacks off, sometimes it would lock me in immediately after and leave me open for free damage, which is really not cool. Now that that's out of the way, let me talk about my playthrough. The intro was really cool and well animated.
The game was rigged from the start.
It set the gritty, sleazy tone for the whole game and the world itself. I looks maxed once again because I made him look like me, obviously.
This is disgusting.
Then I got to the special trait selection, and I loved how they used the Test Your Vigor machine. It was a nice immersive touch that matched the soulless transactional nature of the Mojave Desert. I also liked the little Rorschach test because it was a really memorable way to pick your skills. I was relieved to find out that it let me choose though, because the skills were not the ones I would have actually picked. Plus, I needed to get that repair so I could get this SMG I found earlier. I left the first building, did a little intro story mission, then I went out on my own because I figured I was ready to handle the wastes already. But I got absolutely defiled over and over again by this gang of big-ass scorpions, until I finally realized I wasn't supposed to go that way yet.
Alright, I'm gonna do the fucking main story. I can't kill anything.
I worked my way back to Good Springs to try and get a lower level quest, and had my first run-in with the Powder Gangers, who I was about to have an interesting relationship with. This caught my interest and had me excited to see what I could do to help the town. I met with the guy the Powder Gangers were after, and decided to help him and the townspeople make a stand against those bullies.
You son of a bitch! I'm in!
After rallying everyone in the town,
Let me just read this book.
You made your point.
in the most creative way possible at my low level, we waited and ambushed them. It was at this moment I had completely forgotten I was playing a Fallout game at all. This game is literally a Western RPG.
Good boy.
If that sounds interesting to you, leave my video right now, but leave it running with no volume so I can at least get that sweet, sweet watch time. And buy this game, because you will fall in love. While there's a strong touch of sci-fi that's more prevalent later in the game is a textbook Western. After Good Springs, I broke out on my own and I worked south because I could actually kill things that way.
Shut the fuck up!
There, I found my first faction I didn't completely hate, and I decided to stay on good terms with NCR because they also hated the Powder Gangers and gave me a reason to kill more of them. I liberated Prim, which leveled me up and got me some better weapons, with the hopes that NCR would let me join them and help them fight the Powder Gangers. But no one let me join the faction just yet, so I had to take matters into my own hands.
Whoever's the owner of the white sedan, you left your lights on. Have mercy!
I pulled up to the correctional facility and killed all the Powder Gangers myself, and this gave me a ton of better loot and XP. With a much stronger character, and some better guns finally, I decided it was time to try going north again and head for the Strip.
I hate you! You should not be alive!
The rest of my playthrough would spoil a lot of what this game has to offer, so I'm going to keep the rest of my playthrough pretty vague while I try and explain everything that makes this game so great. On all of my first playthroughs of RPGs, I like to play an anti-hero, where I kill bad people, save nice people, but steal everything that helps me, and kill some people who just suck, or make me follow some BS rules. Since there aren't really any good guys in this game,
I would sooner spit on the grave of my dead mother than let some courier walk the wasteland.
just jerks and bigger jerks, there's a lot of freedom here. This game has literally 0 protected NPCs, with the exception of quest companions, thank God. But if you're on hardcore mode, that all goes out the window. But yeah, if you have the gear and the skill, you can waltz in and burn down any faction in the game at will.
Nah, I'ma do my own thing.
It was actually really cool, and made me wonder why they haven't done something like this in other titles. The only real drawback on this freedom was all the skill caps on everything. Like, for example, this one quest given to you in this vault by some scumbags that requires you to have 40 science to complete it. But then, once you get up to 40 science, you find out that you also need 50 or 60 explosives, which is just kind of bullshit. Like, it should have just said everything I needed from the start. Since I didn't plan on coming back, and these guys were actually major scumbags, I just decided to forego completing the quest altogether and just kill them. But it was annoying that I had to miss out on the extra XP and caps. I get it, that's the nature of an RPG. I just wish they were a little more upfront about what was expected so I didn't have to keep half-finishing quests and coming back. To be fair though, I was trying to beat the game relatively quickly so I could get this video out, and I wasn't trying to keep coming back to the same places over and over again, even if those places were nice to look at. For a barren wasteland desert, the map was actually really visually interesting and had many iconic set pieces. The strip was really cool.
Welcome to New Vegas.
And was the only city I've ever seen in a Fallout game that wasn't completely run down and disgusting.
What the f is this piece of shit?
And I mean that strictly aesthetically because morally, that place is filthy and horrible.
Hey there, friend. You look like you could use some protection.
But there were also tons of other notable locations that were unique and memorable, not just because they were visually striking, but because they had a purpose and made sense in the context of the story and in the world. Accompanied with the excellent visual storytelling you'd expect, the individual locations all matched the tone of the game in their own unique ways. The most iconic set pieces, though, obviously belong to the factions. The factions were really insanely cool in this game, and were a lot more fleshed out than I had expected. Every faction has their pros and their cons, and they're all motivated by some ideology that makes at least some kind of sense.
By order of Caesar, all visitors must disarm and relinquish all banned items. Alcohol and all chems, including stims.
This gave life to the world and the overall conflict, and made it feel like your choices had weight, because there are consequences for almost every decision you make. The Legion is a group of cutthroat fanatics looking to drive the degenerate practices from the Mojave, while the NCR strove for order in the traditional sense.
Sending more troops, yes, to reinforce the outpost.
But cared little for how they got there, and the moral sacrifices they took to impose their will. And the subsidiary factions' motives were all rooted in self-preservation, with differing core philosophies on the best way to achieve it, and how to improve the Mojave. But ultimately, in the words of a wise man, everyone wants to save the world. They all just disagree on how.
You wanna make my cock explode now?
A couple small complaints I had with them is that, one, none of the quests really fed into one another, so I spent hours going camp to camp to try and find the right person to give me the next quest for the NCR. This was particularly annoying because I was trying to get a specific set of quests from them, but they never got offered to me, and I couldn't find the right person to trigger it, so I ended up just kind of giving up and settling with the ending I got. This was obviously fixed in their next big title because in Skyrim, they usually make it pretty clear who you need to talk to next.
Do you want me to hold your hand as well?
And I get it, I don't want the game to hold my hand, but like if you could at least say like, hey, this camp needs some help, instead of me having to fast travel to every different camp after I complete one objective just to see who will potentially give me a quest. And the second thing is, there were not really enough ways that the side factions connected to the larger main story events, and they had little influence on your overall ending, even though they get mentioned. Now I'd be lying if I said I didn't have to use a guide a couple times just to try and shape my ending to include the Brotherhood of Steelmore, but that wasn't really possible, so I had to leave it to headcanon.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
I'll do my best to keep this spoiler free, so don't worry, I'm going to keep as many details out as possible. The ending to this game can go a few different ways at large, but it provides a cinematic that describes the outcomes for everyone you've dealt with, whether they played a big part in the main story events or were just a small part of your journey. I thought it was really cool to have everything, even some stuff I didn't realize would be mentioned, brought up at the end of the game. What are you talking about? This made me feel like I actually impacted the Mojave, for better and for worse. Even though I didn't get the exact outcome I was looking for, it was ultimately something my crazy wildcard character would have been content with. But that said, this feature, which is rarely executed so well, really encourages the player to replay it. And if my Steam library wasn't so backed up with other titles I'm itching to try, I'd probably be running it back to see what other choices I could make and see how they affect the end. Like I said before, all I would want to change about this is I wish the smaller factions influenced more of the overall outcome of the Mojave, rather than just how they were influenced by it. Overall though, it was one of the best RPGs I have ever played because you can really impact the world with no bumpers. And it made me really want to sink my teeth into Baldur's Gate because I feel like this game walked so that game could run. One day I'll do a video on that, but I heard that's one huge time sink. Baby steps. Thanks again if you made it this far. Please drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Also, I have a link to my Twitch. I rolled out these new full screen alerts that completely ruin whatever game I'm playing. So if you ever want to come through and sabotage me, then the link is right there. But yeah, thanks again for your time. And if you ever see this game on sale, honestly, just look on G2A or something. You could get it for pretty cheap, and it is well worth your time and money. And it definitely lives up to the hype, even after all these years. Until next time, stick around.